Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another amazing episode on the Unleashing Potentials podcast. My name is Bernadette Desir, and I'm your host. And joining me today is Rodney Lawson. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Bernadette?
I'm great. I'm loving the weather, the
Yeah,
sunshine, everything's green. It's nice. It's a breath of fresh air after hibernating for so long in the winter.
I
Yeah.
can relate.
Yeah. Where about are you, Rodney?
I'm in Houston, Texas at the moment, but I grew up in Buffalo, New York, close to
Oh,
Canada.
wow. Oh,
So
wow.
I'm, excuse me, I'm quite familiar with, the hibernation and then looking forward to the summers. Summers are gorgeous up north.
Yeah. Yeah, they are. Yeah. How is the heat there in Texas?
It's a little hot. We're like in the low 90s every day. So yeah,
Oh,
it's hot
wow.
here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, welcome to the podcast, Rodney. So excited to learn more from you and to hear what you do. And yeah, to start, can you tell us who you are and what you do?
Yes, I am what you would call a magnetic leadership expert. And people always say, well, what is that? Well, what I do is I help leaders build loyalty amongst their followers, like a magnet attracts, types of metal. I help leaders attract followers through building loyalty. And I have a consulting company called Rodney Lawson LLC, and we work with mid-level management folks. We work with executives. I also do keynote speaking, and I have a lot of workshops and offsite events for corporate folks that are looking for me to come in and either fire up their crowd or give them something that is thought provoking.
Mhm.
Just leave them with a good feeling in their mindset about the company and the direction.
Oh, wow. That's pretty powerful, moving work that you do.
Thank you.
Yeah. Did you always wanted to do what you do? Did you wake up one day and tell your mom and or parents that this is exactly what you're gonna do, or did you learn along the way and had a few bumps?
That is an interesting question. I kind of stumbled into it. Uh, I've got about 33 years in the corporate world in management and leadership, and
Mhm.
about 23 as an executive. So, when you're in the corporate world, you're inclined to do a lot of speaking. So, I've done a lot of hosting of award ceremonies, recognition ceremonies, corporate events, and I would always go in and talk to my trainees about direction,
Mhm.
right? Whenever they were new to the company, kind of set the tone and express the company culture and what we, expected and what they could expect of me as their leader as well. And
Mhm.
so I really enjoyed that. Being in front of people and talking to people was a safe space for me. And although I grew rapidly up the chain in the corporate world, I always felt like my calling was to do something larger. And so about 2 years ago was when I left the corporate world and started my own business, my own consulting company, moving in this direction. So to answer your question, it wasn't something that I sought out to do early on that I thought would be um, my kind of calling, but
Mhm.
it was a part of my natural God given gifts, and I just feel safe on stage speaking in front of people. I feel safe conducting workshops, facilitation of ideas and thought leadership type of information.
Mhm.
So stumbled upon it, and it's
Yeah.
a part of my purpose now.
Yeah, that's
So
awesome. Yeah. You know what? Most people are the opposite. I'm sort of the opposite. I don't do people, like the massive crowds. I know eventually I'll have to do that, but I know nothing of it.
Mhm.
Um, what would you say to people like me or who are in different professions? Because when we're working with the public, we
Mhm.
have to think outside the box and
Yes.
put others first. Let's say someone's starting their company and whatever it may be, they don't know how to connect with the audience or the people they're serving. What would you say to them?
Well, there's a couple of things. One, it's getting past the anxiety, right? And
Mm.
so, in order to get past that, there's a lot of different tools and techniques out there. Um, I would say that the best is probably, you have to dive into it
Mm-hmm.
And then once you get that first experience, no matter how you feel, it is going to be kind of scary. You're going to be kind of nervous.
Mm-hmm.
You have to continue. You have to continue on that horse. It's like riding a horse. I'll give you an example. I had a manager once who had, kind of stage fright. And I would go in and I would talk to all of the training classes. And at this particular location, we had 3 training classes going on at once. And
Mm-hmm.
so I knew he needed development in that area. And I said to him, look, if you ever are going to become a senior manager, you're going to have to, feel comfortable getting in front of large groups. Because at the time, we had 1,100 employees at this location. And, of course, there were times when I had to speak to all 1,100 employees.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I needed him to get comfortable with it.
Yeah.
So we go into the training class. I say, here's what I want you to do. Take some notes. I'm going to speak. I want you to take notes on everything. Then we're going to review it. And then the next day, we're going to come back in and you're going to speak. And you can talk about anything you want. I don't care if it's about how to fix a car. It doesn't have anything to do with the company. That doesn't matter. But what I want you to do is just feel comfortable talking about something you're familiar with in front of the group.
Mm-hmm.
So we did that. We reviewed some of the points. The following day, we get into the training class and he gets up there. And within the first 5 seconds, he starts stuttering real bad and fumbling over his words. And he gets so frustrated, he walks out the training room. And there's about 25 trainees in there watching. And so I immediately go out after him. The trainer takes over the class. And I find him in the bathroom in tears, crying like a baby.
Mm.
Yeah. And I said to him, I said, listen, you have 2 choices. Number 1, you can get yourself together and you can take the rest of the day off, calm down, and you can come back in tomorrow and we can go back in that training class and you can finish your speech. Other option is to get yourself together and we can go back in that training class right now and you can finish your speech.
Yeah.
And he chose it later, got himself together, came back in the next day, was in a different mindset frame. And when he got up there and felt the warm welcome of the audience, he managed to get through that. And I'm proud to say, I cut a long story short, but I'm proud to say, within 2 years, he was promoted to senior manager. And today he's an executive with a company and, speaking to hundreds of people.
Wow.
So it was a matter of having that voice to help him along the way, to push him. But at the same time, understanding that I'm going to be there to catch him if he falls. Right. And sometimes we need that. So I would say number 2 is, find a mentor, someone that can help you or coach you in that particular situation. But you got to push yourself.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny that we're talking about the exact same thing that I've been looking on YouTube all weekend.
Oh,
I
really?
don't have a mentor. I know I'm doing public speaking. People say,
Mhm.
"Oh, I'm really good. I come up with great questions." I don't know how I do it, but I think I could polish a little bit here and there. That's what I've been looking up all weekend on YouTube, public speaking. What would you
Wow.
say is the delicious recipe of public speaking? Because you got to somehow connect with the audience.
There's this thing that's called charisma, right? And everybody, a lot of people know what the definition of charisma is, but let me tell you how I define it. It's when I take my message and I put it on a spear and I hurl it right through the audience heart. I want them to feel what I'm talking about. And the difference that I would say with me and a lot of other speakers is that I'm not only going to give you something thought provoking, but I'm going to give you something that you're going to feel because I'm a very emotional person. I wear my emotions on my sleeves or on the outside, and I'm not afraid to admit that. There are 2 things about me unapologetically. I will say that I'm emotional. I do cry. I will cry. I will get emotional. There are certain stories that, we could talk about today, and I might get emotional. The other thing about me is that I am unapologetically when it comes to my religion and spirituality. I believe in God, and that's just where I stand. So those 2 things, they sit at the forefront of who I am and what I am.
Those are great things to work with. And I've been talking about vulnerability, which I think can tie into what you just said and into what you do. Because often people want something from us to trigger something in them so they can
Yes.
connect and relate. How can we do that? Because not everyone has that ability. Everybody can speak, but
Hmm.
are people listening when they're speaking?
You know, it's funny you say that. You mentioned vulnerability because that was the next point that I was going to make.
Yeah.
No, seriously, when you talked about connecting with the audience, right?
Hmm.
Vulnerability has a way of getting people to open up, especially men. When I talk about my vulnerabilities to a male or a group of males, that's when I get them to open up and start sharing their stories. When you share your stories, people have a tendency to start reflecting upon their story. And when they do that, there's a connection there, right? There's a bond. And they're looking for, okay, what happened? How did you get through that? What struggles did you face? What barriers? And what steps did you take? Because maybe that's something I could look to do if I'm, faced with that situation in the future.
Hmm.
So that vulnerability is powerful when it comes to public speaking.
Yeah, yeah. And that's my secret ingredient. As you may see my podcast, I don't know, I interview everybody. I tie it into story. If even a tree has a story, insects,
Yes.
everything that breathes, that exists, that moves, it has a ancestors and it has a story. And I think people connect with stories and it connects all of us because no matter how different the path is, there's
Mhm.
always a history of it.
Yes.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. What would you say the key ingredient or success of leadership is?
Oh wow. That's there's a lot that comes into play with that. And I'm glad you asked that question because a lot of what I do is centered around leadership.
Hmm.
The reason why, let me start by saying the reason why it's so critical in today's world. Two things. Number one, COVID, and number two, millennials are hitting the workspace, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
after COVID, people were allowed to work from home, right?
Hmm.
And now corporations are trying to get people to come back to the workplace because they want that same corporate culture that they used to have. But it's hard putting that genie back in the bottle once employees have had the opportunity to work from home and center their lifestyle around how can I work and be more efficient and still, you know, have that intertwined with my personal life as opposed to spending time driving in a car to an office every day. Then you
Hmm.
have millennials. Millennials are not like all of the other, I would say, groups, such as myself. They're not prone to get out of high school, get a job, or go to college and get a job and stay in that job until you retire. And so they're not the type of individuals that would accept bad leadership. They'll move on. And that's what we're seeing in
Yeah.
today's world. Yeah, with a lot of millennials in the workplace, and
Yeah.
post COVID,
Hmm.
we're seeing a struggle with leadership. And so what I find is that the leadership of yesterday is not successful when you compare it to the environment of today.
Hmm.
And so here's my take on that. Leadership starts with a foundational contextual core. Like, so what sits at the bottom, right, is essentially loyalty. How you build loyalty with those individuals. Okay. Then what sits above that is influence. If your foundation has cracks in it, your influence is not going to be that high.
Hmm.
And so I have a whole course that I work with individuals on that I teach, well, whether I'm individually coaching them or I have a course around workshops, et cetera, that I do in the corporate world, where I go in and I show leaders, first of all, to how to understand where they are, the level of influence that they have on this spectrum. And
Hmm.
then once we understand where they are, then I give them tools and techniques to build upon that. And it's a scale that ranges from 0 to 100%. And usually below 70% is where you might want to consider whether you're the right fit for being in a leadership position. Now, I've seen individuals that's been in the 40s and high 30s that turned it around, because once they figured out, we figured out and found out where they were through assessments. We were able to give them tools and techniques, and as long as they were diligent with those tools and techniques, they were able to build that loyalty with their employees. And so when we talk about leadership, again, it's loyalty, and it's making sure that you have the influence. If you don't have that, you take the title away, you're not going to really lead anybody.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, thank you for mentioning COVID and also millennial. I happen to be a very fantastic, cool millennial. Here's here's my takeaway. Yes, I get bored. All right. If there's nothing there for me, I'm moving to the next. If I can't relate, I'm out. If I can't connect, I'm out. Right. And I think working with millennials, I don't know the different names, from different generations, working together, there's so much that we can do together and learn from each other. But often I find in leadership, there's sort of a division or a crack in the foundation, as you were explaining. A division that we're young, we're stupid, we don't know anything. There isn't too much we can add that people from other generations can. What would you say to that?
I will tell you this. You are dead right on center with what you said. And that's one of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing, why I'm teaching what I'm teaching, because I find that the millennials are one of the hardest working groups, right? They are smart. They show a great tenacity and determination for things that they want to accomplish. But just because they don't fit in this box of do what I say when I say it, some of the other generations kind of frowned upon them. And I think that is wrong, because it goes against one of my core principles, which is treat everybody with dignity and respect. If I can tell you this, I grew up with an ACE. My ACE is, an adverse childhood experience, right? My father was an alcoholic who gambled a lot, had a violent personality. And because of that, I acquired skills. And one of the things that I picked up was I knew what it felt like living in a household and being disrespected a lot. So I never wanted to treat anybody with a lack of dignity and respect. And so that's where it starts, right? I don't care how old you are. If I don't respect you, how can I expect for you to respect me? You understand what I'm saying? And that's where some of the disconnect comes in. It's because I've been these leaders have been operating in this mold for so long that it's do as I say because I said it, because I got the title. I'm your supervisor, I'm your manager, I'm your boss. I tell you what to do. That now you have a workforce that is saying, no, you're not going to talk to me that way. You're not going to treat me that way. I'll go work someplace else. Now you got high attrition, right? And your corporate culture, your culture is kind of toxic at that point. And so what I do is I take those leaders and I work with them and help them understand more from a millennial perspective. And that it starts with, what I call the 4 greatest motivators, love, trust, honesty, and respect. So I help them build those 4 pillars with their people to get better results. But millennials, you guys just aren't having it. And I respect you guys. Because growing up in that household, that was one of the things that my siblings and I, we were taught by my father, is that you don't have to respect anybody that don't respect you. So we've kind of always, been that way. But at the same time, I never wanted to hurt anybody, because I knew what it felt like to be really, really just beat down from a disrespect standpoint. And I don't want anybody feeling that way. And as a matter of fact, I will say this. The majority of the leaders that I've had to terminate were because of that principle right there, that they did not know how to treat people. It wasn't because of performance. The majority of them, the vast majority, was because they didn't know how to treat people. And I will never tolerate that under my watch. I can't stomach seeing people that's working hard on the lowest level of the company, and they might have, in a lot of cases, they have more problems that they're dealing with
Mm-hmm.
than the people that are making more money and got the higher titles.
Mm-hmm.
And they come into this office and they get beat down. No,
Yeah.
that's not gonna happen under my watch.
Mm-hmm.
Never thought.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think the world needs the type of leadership that you're offering. I know
Mm-hmm.
you're based in the States. I hope you're reaching across the borders because there's so much work that needs to be done. And there are people waiting on you, your company, your organization, your skills. Do you work with people that are out of the States or just in the States?
Absolutely. I will go anywhere in the world. No, seriously, I know we're laughing about that, but let me
Yeah.
give you a little bit more commentary on my background. I spent
Mhm.
almost 2 years working for a company in Guyana, South America. I was
Mhm.
living in the Maryland, Washington, D.C. area, and they commuted me to go back and forth between South America, Guyana,
Mhm.
and home. And, so I will go anywhere. I travel the world a lot. I love traveling. Just last year alone, I hit a bucket list item by going to Senegal and Dakar, Dakar, and I got to see the major statue there. Oh my gosh.
Mhm.
When I saw it in a book many years ago, can't remember how long ago, it became a bucket list item. I gotta go there. So I travel a lot internationally. I've been to China 3 times,
Mhm.
Asia, parts of
Mhm.
South America, Chile. So I've traveled a lot. So I will go anywhere, um, anywhere I am needed, and we can work out the parameters. I will gladly come in and help coach those leaders.
Mm, that's awesome, which is gonna flow quite well with my next question.
Okay.
Because you've traveled to so
hmm
many different countries, what do you notice in their principles and leadership skills and how they treat people?
One of the things that I will say is that different cultures around the world have different value systems.
Hmm.
And what I will say about the Western civilization, like where we are, us, primarily the US, but US and Canada,
Hmm.
we cater more towards capitalism, open market, make as much money as you can, free opportunity. And in some of the other countries, I find that there is, more governmental control, but there's more of situations where they look to take care of the people as opposed to letting the people, kind of take care of themselves.
Mm.
And I will say one of the things that I notice about the Asian cultures is that there's a lot more closeness and togetherness.
Hmm.
I saw that in parts of Africa countries that I visited. There's a lot more togetherness. Now, it's not that they don't have their situations in the U.S. where there's crime and this and that, but in the U.S., when you look at how we have this melting pot and all of these individual cultures and identities that have been stripped, and I can say that because I can tell you that being a black person in the United States, I can tell you that our identity was stripped away when we were, brought over as slaves and not allowed to have the same status as others. Some of it was, dehumanizing. And
Mm.
so when you take all of that into context, you create this kind of quasi class system.
Hmm.
But here's the key. The one thing that I will say living in this Western civilization is you don't have to stay there. But it takes two things.
Hmm.
One, you have to keep an open mind for development because you have to develop yourself, right? To get better and better and better. You have to understand the rules. You have to understand how things operate. If
Hmm.
you don't, you're just going to get taken advantage of. The other thing is that you have to have a burning desire of getting out of that situation.
Hmm.
And as long as you have those two things and you continue to grow, you continue to have that passion for moving forward, there's a way out.
Yeah.
I will tell you this, Bernard, that the person that's speaking to you today is not the person that I was, 35 years ago,
Mm.
40 years ago.
Mhm.
And I say that because I was a product out of the hip hop culture. Talked with a lot of slang, a lot of jargon, a lot of colloquialisms.
Mm.
And when I first stepped into the corporate world, there was a challenge um, that I could not grow in the corporate world in some of the upper management individual eyes because of what they saw on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't know what was on the inside. They didn't know my capacity of developing myself. They didn't know my ability, my determination, my drive, that I did not want to live the life like I grew up.
Yeah.
And that was, that desire, that fire that burned so deep.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was told basically, um, you need to choose a goal that's more realistic, because I put down my goal was to be, a vice president executive with the company.
Mm-hmm.
I rebelled against that, and continued to work on what I needed to work on to grow, like improving my professional dress, improving my communication, all of these things that I had to work on to get there. So there's a way out. That's the one thing that you do get in the Western civilization. It's not a lot of defined class system where you have to stay at this level. No, people can be in poverty and become millionaires and billionaires, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they have to have that tenacity.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll share this since we're on that topic. There are three things that I noticed that people need. Number one, they have to have clarity. It's the three C's: clarity in what they're doing, where they're going. They have to have community. They have to have people around them that can support them and develop them and mentor them,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then they have to have consistency. Now, it's hard to have the consistency when you don't have clarity and you don't have community.
Mm-hmm.
And I struggled with that with my business for the first year, because I didn't have clarity and I didn't have community. But now that I have those things, wow, the consistency is easy and things are just flowing.
Mm. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. So much we could unpack from just that. um, yeah, thank you for sharing. I hear you talking about ancestral trauma a little bit,
Mm-hmm,
culture,
mm-hmm.
beliefs, mindset, adaptation, all of that. What is it like as a Black man to live in America? I don't live there, but I know what it's like to be different, to be seen different. When people look, they say, oh, this is how so and so looks. There's no way so and so can do this job based on how they look. And you mentioned, to see what's on the inside first. I always tell people, do not judge a book by its cover. Read it and go
Yes,
from there. Yeah.
very powerful statement. Um, there's one that I heard years ago. If you look at a man or a woman as they are, they can't get any better. But if you look at what they have on the inside, they can become great. And that's the problem with a lot of these leaders. They look at the outside and they pass judgment as opposed to looking at what's on the inside.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So your question was, what is it like as a Black man living in America? It can be frustrating
Mm-hmm.
because you are a lot of times seen as the boogeyman, as the monster, as a scary person. Now, depending on how you dress, that plays a role.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on how you articulate yourself and communicate, that plays another role.
Mm-hmm.
And it depends on like your mindset.
Mm-hmm.
First, people are going to judge you by your appearance, what they see.
Yeah.
Uh, I'll give you an example. The first Mercedes Benz that I went to purchase, I went to the dealership and I had on a t-shirt and some jeans, and I couldn't get the time of day, couldn't even get a brochure. So I wouldn't buy from that Mercedes Benz dealership. I ended up going to another one. And when I walked in, I still couldn't get any help. And there were two Black employees there that, didn't see what I was looking for, try to help me either. But
Mm-hmm.
then there was this Caucasian guy that came out, Roy, became a really good friend of mine. He came out and said, hey, can I help you? And so we started talking. We talked for a while. And, I had the jeans and t-shirt on, and he told me about the car that, wasn't even out yet, but it was coming out. Hardest thing to do is put some money down on something you've never seen before.
Yeah.
But we talked, and it just so happened that, my wife at the time and I were at the grocery store later on that evening, and I opened up this magazine as we were in checkout, and I saw that this car was being sold at a rapid rate. It was going to be hard to get.
Mm.
And so immediately I was like, okay, if I want this, I need to go and get it. So then the very next day, I'm on my lunch break at work, and now I'm dressed in a suit, shirt, and tie, and I got a check in my hand.
Mm.
I'm going to put $10,000 down on this car, right? And so as soon as I pull up, I get out the car and I'm walking in. Now everyone's running towards me trying to see, and it's because of how I'm dressed, right? Suit, shirt, tie. And as I'm walking by the black gentleman, they're looking at, can we help you? I said, no, I'm coming to, I'm going to see Roy. And they
Mm.
gave me the look like, why are you going to see him? You should be coming to see me. But
Mm.
I don't think they realized I was the same guy that was there the day before in a t-shirt and jeans.
Yeah.
So there's a lesson in that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so gave Roy the check, and 3 or 4 months later, when they unleashed that vehicle, I got one of the very first vehicles to hit the state of Virginia. I was living in Virginia at the time, to hit the state of Virginia in that model of Mercedes. And the first thing I did, Bernadette, I got in that Mercedes because the dealership only got in two. My vehicle that they sold me, and then they got one more that they had to display for 4 months, so you could sell it, but you couldn't take ownership of it.
Mm.
I got in that vehicle and I drove all the way down to that other dealership,
Mm-hmm.
onto the parking lot, got out the car, and then of course they're all coming out to see. And the first thing they said was, "Hey, how'd you get one of those? Is that out yet?" And I
Mm-hmm.
said, "Well, you guys had the opportunity to sell me one, but I came up here and no one wanted to help me."
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, yep.
Mm.
And just got in the vehicle and drove off. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it can be challenging, to answer your question, as a Black man in America, but there are also things that you can do to enhance yourself, like improve your communication, your dress, and the way you come across,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then you're not looked upon as a quote unquote boogeyman.
Mm.
But yeah, there's a lot of frustration there, moments,
Mm.
I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
mhm.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, and you mentioned that your father was abusive and an alcoholic. So was
Yeah.
mine, right? And I think how we grow up sometimes can be a position that can set us off in life. All the pain, all the rejection, the hurt, the trauma. I think those are meant to be fuel, not bombs to finish us off. What has your childhood taught you?
Excellent question. I used to look at my childhood in that situation as just fuel to want to do better. And I didn't think that highly of my father in so many areas. And it wasn't until I actually went through therapy and found that all of those things were not done to me, they were done for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I was in a conversation with my therapist at one point, and we were talking about like how disrespectful my father was and some of the story challenges that I had gone through. And she said, you do realize that all of the people that you touched in the corporate world from a positive standpoint and treating them with dignity and respect and teaching leaders that that's the way to be, you do realize that all of those people
Mm-hmm.
are a result of what you got from your father. And
Mm.
so now, what my father had done to me in my mind
Mm-hmm.
was not a detriment anymore.
Mm.
So now I look at my father as a hero. Because he put me in those situations, it gave me a skill set and a tool that I'm now able to affect, thousands of lives. And I say that because, at some of these locations, we had thousands of employees. And as they would turn over, thousands more. And,
Mm-hmm.
so I know I've worked with thousands of employees. So to have that impact, and to know now in my mind, in my later years, that you might not have been that way if it wasn't for your dad.
Mm. Yeah.
So be thankful. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you said you went to therapy. I can't crack a man. I don't get how you guys think, why you think that way, what you do, why you do it, how you do it. It's very rare to find an emotional man that can connect with a woman. Do you notice that in the line of work that you do without the person giving away what's happening with them or in their life?
Let me make sure I fully understand your question.
Hmm.
Um, you're saying that with the work that I do I find that it's difficult because men hide their emotions? Is that another way of putting it?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, because I think sometimes what we experience at home of our childhood can impact how we perform at work. And not
Yes.
everyone at work can see what's happening, but there are those who can see behind what we're hiding at work.
Yes. Um, the ones that can see are the ones that are really observant, and it's usually the ones that have faced some type of abuse. I can say that um, I have been labeled a clairvoyant.
Mm-hmm.
Where I can't really see the future, but I observe behavior very well, facial expressions, body language, disposition, tone, movement, or not even see the person, but hear them, or not even see them or hear them, but hear a story. And I can pretty much come to a conclusion of what's coming next because of that particular behavior. And that's one of the reasons why I do so well when it comes to coaching individuals
Mm-hmm.
from that standpoint. Um, like, for example, I'll give you a really good example. I've worked with a few people who were struggling in their jobs with the person that they report to.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, usually in this case, this person has this issue for one of three reasons. It's either
Mm-hmm.
number one, they don't really know what they're doing. Number two, they are in a position where they are afraid, they're scared in some form,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so they're just doing whatever is being told and treating people a certain way because they're scared, right? Throwing people under the bus because they don't want to be the one to be honest about a situation, right? That happens. Well, the third thing is they're just an idiot. And I say that meaning that they get a certain sense of highness, of joy and pleasure out of terminating someone, seeing someone lose their job, or yeah, I said this to them, or I said that. They're proud of those moments, right? And so it's one of those three things. And so I said, what we need to do is we need to figure out which of those three things that person is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, tell me more about this person, right? So that we can figure this out. And so we figure out what type they are. And once we figure out what type they are,
Mm-hmm.
then I can teach them exactly how to maneuver in that environment with them. For example, I was working with a gentleman and we had determined that the person that he reported to was afraid. He was afraid that he was going to lose his job. He wasn't looked upon as one of the most successful leaders, managers in that company. And because of that, it was hard to trust him and hard for him to trust anyone else because he would throw you under the bus in a minute. And that's because he was afraid, right? And so in situations like that, you have to be careful. You have to always make them feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
You have to let them know that you're there to support them. So when I've worked for individuals like that, I would tell them like, look, at the end of the day, I'm honest and I'm sincere. I'm here to support you. I need you to know that. I need you to believe that. I'm here to support you. I'm not going to go say, if I have something to discuss, I'm going to come discuss it with you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we're at an impasse and it's something really critical and I need to go to someone else, I will, but I'll tell you to your face that I'm going to go to someone else, right? If we can't resolve this. And so at least that way we form a foundation or a pillar for trust, right? You can trust that here's how I'm going to handle it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then it kind of forces them to try and handle me the same way,
Yeah.
as opposed to throwing me under the bus behind closed doors, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's just an example of reading people and being able to coach based off of that, which came from
Mm-hmm.
that situation that I grew up in. That skill set came from that
Mm-hmm.
particular.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Sounds like you have really good intuition, which all of us have,
Yeah.
but we don't always use it. Even though
Yes.
we have it, we all have the same ability of using it. I think our intuition is just saying, this is wrong. I
Hmm.
should apologize. I shouldn't have
Hmm.
done that, right? We know. We just don't act upon what we know is right to do. Yeah.
And that's what it boils down to. What's right.
Mm,
One of the other things that I find, Bernadette, is that we're not as effective in looking for what we need when it comes to hiring people, especially since there's a lot of technology out there like AI. And the AI is looking for certain words in a resume and certain this and certain that. So they're looking at skill sets. And the problem with that is that you're not really interviewing for values and character. To me, I've always interviewed for values and character before I looked at skill sets and before I looked at experience.
hmm
Because if I have someone that doesn't know how to deal with people, but they got 5 years experience, and I got someone that I hired and they've only been on the job for 5 months, but they know how to deal with people. If I have a humanistic situation, which of those two are going to handle it better? Well, common sense, it's going to be the individual who with 5 months, right?
Yeah.
Because he knows how to deal with people.
hmm
And so I remember one of my peers telling me once, kind of chuckling, he said, some people got 5 years experience and some people got 1 year experience 5 times. That means every year they're not learning anything new. It's the same thing over and over and over again. I know,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of experience, I
Mhm.
once was young.
Likewise. Actually, my birthday is tomorrow, so I'm
Oh, there you
yeah,
go. Happy early birthday.
thank you.
Yeah, yeah. You know what I find when I was looking for a job, even now, if I were to look for a job,
Uh-huh.
sometimes companies need resumes, they need experience. You know
Mm-hmm.
what? Not every millennial has experience. How can, leaders and organizations say, hey, I was once young, so I'm gonna give you a shot, even if you don't deserve it, because I see potential.
Wow. Excellent question. I just went through this with um, my son. I call him my son. It's my wife's son.
Hmm
He applied for a job at a car dealership, and he's a millennial. He's young. And, they said, we really like you, but we have a problem. Like, people around your age. He didn't say kids, but he said like people around your age. They're not real serious, and they don't want to show up sometimes. And we
hmm
just need, to know that you're serious. And so they agreed to continue to interview the next day.
hmm
And so he came home and he talked to us about it. And I said, he needs to see your values.
mm
I said, tell him that you have a son and that you really, really take care of your son. You are the one that reads him bedtime stories at night. You're the one that makes sure that he has something to eat.
hmm
You're the one that's responsible for, going up to the school and talking to the teachers and because you're very responsible,
hmm
don't put you in the class how he's classifying all of the others.
Yeah.
And he went back and he had that conversation and he got hired. And this was 2 years ago, and he has since been promoted. I don't know how many times. He's doing
Oh,
extremely
wow.
well.
Wow.
Yeah. In fact, the leaders left and went to another dealership. And who did they tap on the shoulder to pull them over into an elevated position?
hmm
It was him. Yeah.
Wow.
But it all stems from. So to answer your question, let me just make this really succinct and simple.
hmm
If you don't have the experience, go in and talk about your values, your character.
hmm
When I remember applying for an assistant vice president job, and all I had was a high school diploma because I have a 10-year gap in my education from when I went back to school to
hmm
get my business degree and my MBA, right? 10-year gap. So in this gap, I'm pursuing my corporate career and I applied for this position. And at the time, I was in school, you know, pursuing my business degree.
Mhm.
but I hadn't completed. So all I had was a high school diploma.
Mm.
I had an interview with 7 executives. I never forget that. I had to fly to Atlanta from the DC area and interview with 7 executives. And in every interview,
Mhm.
at the beginning of the interview, I would say, now there's something on there you're not going to see. You're not going to see that I have my degree yet. But let me tell you something. I'm pursuing it right now. And I want you to know that nothing is going to stop me from doing that.
Mhm.
The other thing I want you to know is that it will not inhibit my ability to do my job. And that's because the last job that I was in, I was able to effectively excel at that and still,
Mhm.
take classes and do what I needed to do to finish up my degree. So by me putting that out there on the forefront, it showed a sense of character, a sense of responsibility, a sense of what my values are, right?
Mhm.
And that will always, always be more powerful than any type of experience. Because I can tell you, Bernadette, that I've had doctors, individuals with doctor degrees that I had to terminate because they didn't know how to treat people.
Mm.
Likewise, I had individuals that I pulled that came off the street. Some of them GED. Didn't even
Mhm.
have a high school diploma. They had a GED, and they excelled in the corporate world.
Mhm.
Some of the females I recall, they were on welfare before they came to, and now they're in elevated executive positions across the United States. Now this was probably 25 years ago that I was working with them and had hired them, but they're all doing extremely well now.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's awesome. Those are success stories for sure. Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
absolutely.
Yeah. How can we learn from rejection, failure? Because none of us want to be rejected. It's
It's funny.
painful.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it is. It is painful. Um, I have recently started working with this group called the Purpose Company, where they help you to kind of find your purpose. And
Mm.
what I learned through that process is that I am a rejection overcomer.
Mm.
And so, because of my situation in growing up with my ace,
Mhm.
I a part of being a rejection overcomer is that you become really adaptable and you become really determined on one end, and then on the other end that's not so good you have to watch out for is that you become a people pleaser.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so those are like core common characteristics of me. And it's funny because once I discovered that through this program, I started looking back at some of the decisions that I made. Because this whole rejection overcomer of what I am, it's all about how I made decisions in my life growing up.
Mhm.
And so all of those decisions, some of them I would not take advantage of, didn't handle them the right way for fear of being rejected.
Mm.
Some of them, like when I was in that, sitting in that conference room and was being told that I should choose another goal, right?
Mm.
That's where I was being rejected. And that's when I was like, okay, no, I got to fight against this. I got to show them,
Mhm.
you know? So there's different ways, different tools that we develop to handle that rejection. And what I would say is, first, you have to understand what those triggers are. And
Mm.
then once you understand what those triggers are
Mm.
of being rejected, then you have to find out what tool I can put in place to help me deal with that at that moment in time. Because some people, they just run away. Some
Mm.
people, they put up their fists and they're ready to fight, right? They get confrontational. So
Mhm.
you have to know what those triggers are so that whenever they're tapped into, you can say, okay, let me do this.
Mm.
And it's something as simple as me being the person that I am and having these skill sets. I developed something to help me with that. I call it PRT 123.
Mm.
Okay. And this comes from having a background of developing training programs and coaching people on it.
Do
The
you hear
P
all
stand,
the sirens?
what's that?
Sirens. We have police training happening.
Oh, I can't hear
Happened.
them.
Okay, it happened yesterday. I don't
Uh-huh.
know how many cars or motorcycles or police cars going on the road. I
Wow. I
think
don't hear any. I
the
can't hear any.
training.
Oh, the
I
training. Okay.
could, yeah. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
It's okay. And so, so this concept that I came up with to help me deal with when my triggers are tapped into, it's called PRT 123. The P stands for pause.
Mm,
The R stands for respond, but you got to respond with grace and gander. And the T stands for take. You have to take accountability. So if you didn't do so well, you got to beat
mm,
yourself up a little bit. If you did well, pat yourself on the back and reward yourself.
mhm,
And so whenever those triggers are tapped into, sometimes my pause is a split second. Sometimes it might be a day or two before I can respond because I want to respond with grace and gander. And
mhm,
then sometimes your response might be, you think with grace and gander, but you might have said something a little sarcastic, right?
mm,
So in that case, it's like, okay, that wasn't really the nicest thing to do. So
mhm,
let me now take accountability and beat myself up a little bit and say, nah, that shouldn't have, I should have responded different.
mm,
Okay. Now the 1, 2, 3 is all about communication.
mm,
The 1 stands for communicate. The 2 stands for how you communicate. And the 3 stands for did they get the message? When people get into a heated debate and argument, disagreement, and there's tension, usually they just want to focus on the number one. I want to get my point across. Listen to me. This is my point. They
mhm,
don't take time to go to the second step of how am I delivering it? Because that delivery means everything. It's not about you just getting it out saying what you have to say. It's about you getting it out saying what you have to say, but also how are you delivering it? And then 3, did they take the message? Did they get what you were meaning to say? So if it's done from a Grace and Gander standpoint because you've taken that pause,
mhm.
then you know that you're communicating it and you're communicating it in a way that is showing vulnerability, it's showing who you are,
Mhm.
and it's more prone to have them receive it, right? So then you know the third step is taking place. They got the message.
Yeah,
So PRT 1, 2, 3. And so whenever I'm triggered, I practice PRT 1, 2, 3.
that's awesome. Thank you for sharing. I can say the accountability part, we struggle with it. Some of us
Mm.
deny it, some of us
Yes,
own up to it, but it's something we struggle with because maybe it's how we were programmed or raised. Maybe we were taught that it's a sign of weakness if you admit you were wrong, right? Do you see what I mean?
I do. I do, but it's just the opposite. It's a sign of strength.
Yeah.
I've never felt embarrassed or anything other than communicating my truth.
Mm,
If I don't know something, I don't have a problem saying I don't know it
mhm,
because that's the best way to get help.
mhm.
And I just, I understand what you're saying because I see it a lot
Yeah.
where people don't, take accountability. But some of that is self-reflection, right? You have to be able to look at yourself. And so I
Mhm,
have this other course that I teach individuals. It's called self-worth, right?
mhm,
On one end of the spectrum, you have narcissists. On the other end of the spectrum, you have people with very, very low self-esteem.
mm,
And where you want to be is in the middle, right?
yeah.
In the middle is where you see yourself how other people see you.
Mm,
See, the narcissist looks at themselves different how the world sees them. The
mhm,
person with low self-esteem looks at the world different how the world sees them.
mhm,
But if you see the world how the world sees you, then guess what? We all have things we need to work on. You're going to be prone to work on those things because you're self-aware, right? And
mhm.
so the key is being in that middle kind of section, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Yeah, here's my thing with some leadership is
Mm-hmm.
that it's a hierarchy. Unfortunately, that's the best way society placed it. So I have no other words to describe it. All right. There are people at the top calling the shots, but they're
Mm-hmm.
not in the same level or position or ground that the people they're controlling. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a two-way street. When someone is leading, they need to know why they're leading and who they're leading. I find that often it's not always the case where we listen to those we are leading.
That is true. And that's one of the reasons, again, why I'm so passionate about what I do,
Mm,
because that's one of the things that I teach. You, as a leader, if you sit at the top of that hierarchy, you have to come down and talk to people on those other levels and understand what they're going through, what they're feeling,
mm-hmm,
in order for you to coach the people that are just above them.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
If you don't understand what's going on at the bottom, you can't coach the people that's in the middle.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And if that's all you are, then you can take anybody and put them at the top and tell them to tell people what to do.
Yeah.
But if you really want an environment that is thriving in performance and employees are engaged, then you
Mm-hmm,
have to make sure that that leader and the leadership at the top is
mm-hmm.
totally aware of what's going on at the bottom. And that's only going to happen if you get in there, you form relationships, you start talking to people, and you understand with an open mind what they're going through.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the best way. I just about every position I've stepped into,
Mm-hmm,
when I first stepped into that role, I would do a one-on-one with every single employee under my direction.
mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
sometimes it took months because I had a lot of employees, but I would just have, my admin and someone just schedule because they were only like 10-minute,
Mm-hmm,
conversations. And all I wanted to do was talk to them about what their expectations are of me as their leader
mm-hmm.
and what my expectations are of them as an employee.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then when we have that, then I can refer back to it. If there's something that they might have gone astray, have gone off the path, we can refer back to that conversation.
Mm-hmm,
Or I can reward them and say, "Hey, I remember you said this, and this meant a lot. Look at you, you're on your way. You're doing an outstanding job."
mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I truly have a heart for people like you who is making a shift and change in the world. And
Mm-hmm.
also, I even have a heart for those who society just, pushed to the side. I used to work with two major homeless shelters. Um,
Wow.
I, there are stories in there, lots of stories,
I
and
bet.
I don't know. You're very observant, as you say. If you see someone homeless on the street, how many people do you notice cross, go to the other side? They assume that person is violent or they're gonna hurt them. Uh, Lord have mercy if they have different skin complexion or have
Yes.
piercing, right?
Mhm.
Those are
Yep.
the people I am also doing this for. I'm here to say these are people. And I've collected and heard so many stories that have blown my mind.
You know, if you don't mind, I can share one.
Yes, go ahead.
When I was working in Guyana, South America,
Mhm,
um, I remember staying at one of the hotels, and they have security guards around the hotels.
mhm,
And there was a homeless guy sitting on the park bench out in front of the hotel. And so I was on this thing where I was running every day, right? And so I got to the hotel, flew in, got to the hotel, changed my clothes, and just went out for a run. And it's nighttime. And of course, the security guards are looking and they're, want to make sure that I'm safe and all of that. So I was just running a circular motion up and down the street.
mhm.
And the guy, every time I would go around, he would say, one more, so it became kind of a joke as I was running.
Yeah.
And so then when I got through running, I went over to him, and the security guards came over and was trying to prevent us from having a conversation. And I was like, no, 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 he's okay. We're okay. We're just having a conversation. So we
Mhm,
sat on the bench and we started talking. And he asked me if I could give him money to get something to eat. And I said, well, what do you do? And he said, well, I write poetry. I said, okay, write me a poem, and I'll pay you for the poem. How about that? And he says, okay. And so he started to tell me this story while he was writing this poem. And he said, see that restaurant up the street? He
mhm.
said, I was sitting out there one day and I saw that, and it had an outdoor park where people were dining. And there was this guy talking about, oh, the problem with black people, they don't stick together. This is in Guyana, another whole other country, South America. And he was
Yeah.
telling his friends this. And so what ended up happening was he walked over and he said to the guy, he said, excuse me, brother, I'm hungry, I'm homeless. Would you mind giving me something to eat? And the guy said, get away from here, get away from here. You're a bum, you're this, you're that, right?
Mm.
And he said, wow. He said, you know what? I don't want anything to eat. He said, I just wanted to prove a point. He said, here I am, one of your brothers, starving, nothing to eat, homeless. I asked you for something to eat, and you saying the problem is we don't stick together, and you won't even give me something to eat.
Ooh.
Yeah, 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 right.
Wow.
So then he said to me, he said about 5 minutes later, one of his friends that was sitting at the table came out with a styrofoam with a bunch of food.
Mm.
And he was trying to give him the food. And he was like, no, 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 I don't want your food. I don't want your food. And he said, no, you need to take this food. He said, because you really educated me today on that demonstration.
Mm-hmm.
And so he ended up taking the food. But that was a very interesting story because you can learn something from anyone, you know. And he wrote me the most beautiful poem about me being a light, you know,
Wow.
coming to the country, visiting, and just being a light, a beacon of light.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I'll never forget that. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you can learn something from anyone, you know.
Mm-hmm. That is a story. And
Yeah.
I can tell it stayed with you.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I still
Mhm.
have the poem stored away somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
wow, time flies. I have, I think, 3 questions. I'll get to them when my brain's ready. All right, we got to work together, you know?
Yeah.
It's all one body. Like, okay.
Mhm.
Um, let's say you were the next Barack Obama. What would
Mhm.
you change and how the country makes decision in all the how many states? 50, right?
50 states. Yes, here in the
Okay.
United States, 50.
Mm-hmm.
What would I change? Uh, I will say this, it would be an extremely daunting task.
Mm,
But what I would try to do is pull the cultures together as one United States.
mm,
Because right now you have so many different kind of classes,
mm,
and the political field is a landmine because they're drawing up a certain
mhm.
class, each one of them,
Yeah.
and they're trying to get more of those individuals with other individuals, and that's how they win, right? Trying to win the election.
Mm,
But it's tough to accomplish anything once you get into office when there's so much fighting. And that is because there is no one common goal.
mhm,
It's a left and a right. And what we need is a middle. And so if I was the next Barack Obama, I would take on a daunting task of trying to tear down not the identities. I don't want people to lose their identities of their culture. But what I
mhm,
want them to understand is that there's unison, there's a unified purpose for us all
mhm.
to support one another as human beings, as Americans.
Yeah.
Because I don't see that today.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. And I think we need each other. That's what I
Yeah,
keep telling people. And
absolutely.
until we come together as one, you know, the different
Hmm.
colors, apple is still a fruit, banana is still a fruit, strawberry is still a fruit, right? They're in the same category.
That's right.
Until we come together, work together, understand each other, then I don't know.
Yeah, and they're
I
all
just don't.
fruits.
I
Yeah.
just don't. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. So, Rodney, what would you like for my guest, even myself, to get from this episode?
Just insight into me, number one.
Mhm,
Number two, to understand my values and that I'm here to help in any way that I can.
mhm,
That's where I get my greatest sense of purpose. My greatest sense of fulfillment comes through taking my abilities and helping people.
mhm,
And number three, if there's an opportunity that someone is looking for a corporate speaker, keynote speaker to come in and speak to their organization, I would love to do that.
mhm,
I would love to grace their stage. I would also love the opportunity to come in and do a workshop, one of my workshops on leadership for your management team, if that's
mhm,
the case, or individuals that are looking for individual coaching. You know, I'm here for you.
mhm. Thank you for sharing. Is your father still around or has he passed?
No, my father passed in 2014, late 2014. So we buried him in 2015. And that's kind of when I
Okay.
took a downturn there.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. That's when I started to realize that there was like stuff within me that needed to come out that wasn't good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because up until that point, I was operating from a motivational standpoint of I got to prove something to him.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he passed, all that motivation was gone. And I essentially got kind of lost.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I'm sensing he's saying, tell my son I'm sorry.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
He is so proud of the men that you are today and the impact that you're making.
Wow.
I don't know, my psychic gifts are wildfire, so I could not end the episode without saying that he knows, he sees, and he understands the amount of pain that he caused, how much he was hurting you, your family, your mother, and he could have done better, and he is so, so sorry, and hope one day you can find forgiveness in your heart for him.
I have.
Even where he is,
I
to
have.
build a relationship with him because he's been around you quite a bit.
I have. I have forgiven.
Okay, okay. And he's learning to forgive himself because he can see way more than you can see because his eyes are open where he is. He sees. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I had to. Yeah,
Thank you for sharing that. No, I really appreciate that.
yeah, yeah. I feel that. Like, okay, fine. I'll tell him.
No, I really
That's what I'm
appreciate it.
sensing. Yeah, yeah. I said, I'll tell him. I'll tell him. Fine. Mhm. Yeah, yeah. My last question for you, Rodney, is let's say people are watching this, they want to connect with you, they want to partner with you, do the work that you're doing, and learn from you. How can they do that? Do you have a website?
I do have a website. It's simple, rodneylawson.com. But the best way to connect with me is simple. If you go to www.bookwithrodney.com,
Hmm.
you can, take you to my scheduler, and I, offer a 20-minute free consultation call where we can talk and
Hmm.
just see, what it is you would like to accomplish.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
again, it's bookwithrodney.com. Simple.
Yeah.
www.book.rodney.com.
Yeah. Speaking of book, have you been thinking of putting all your experience and work in books for people?
I have written a book. I wrote a
Mm,
book in
okay.
2016, after my father passed. Uh, that year was bad. 2015 was bad for me.
Mm,
Went through a divorce, got laid off from my executive job, buried my father. The only thing that I could focus on was my book. And
mm,
I wrote my book. So I did write a book, Broken, Inspired, and Driven. It's on Amazon.
mm. It's still
And
out now?
uh-huh. So
Oh,
then
wow.
Broken, Inspired, and Driven. Yeah.
Mm, yeah.
And then I have two other books that I'm a part of as an anthology. So with several authors where I wrote certain
Hmm.
chapters in the book.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think one of them is about not about relationships, because there
Hmm.
was a transition. We didn't even touch on this, but there's a transition I went through with the wife that I have today,
Hmm.
and how we ended up meeting,
Mm,
and what I had to learn in order to prepare myself for God bringing me the right one that fits me.
hmm.
And
Wow.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
based off of four pillars: loyalty, affection, transparency, and strength.
Hmm.
And once I realized those are the things that I needed, I wouldn't date anyone
Yeah.
until someone came to me with those four pillars, and she showed up with those four pillars.
It's
And
it's so hard
yeah,
to find those. With those values and qualities. Yeah.
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 They're out there. They're out there. You just have to
Yeah.
be diligent. I was diligent. Yes, I was asked out on dates, and yes, I was,
Hmm.
females tried to court me, but no, if I didn't see those four things, then it was a no.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's funny because when we met, we didn't communicate for 4 months. We just met at a conference. We were like business colleagues or whatever. We met at a conference out in San Diego,
Mhm.
And that's why I'm here in Houston, because she lived here in Houston. I was living in Atlanta at the time.
Yeah.
And we met in San Diego just at a conference. And it just so happened that she saw some leadership stuff that I put on social media 4 months later. And then she reached out, hey, I could have used that. And that's how we
Yeah.
started the conversation. The more I talked to her, the more I started to see, wow, the loyalty is off the chain, you
Hmm.
know? And
Yeah.
then I saw the transparency and I saw the strength. Couldn't see the affection because I was living in Atlanta and she was living in
Hmm.
Houston.
Hmm.
But, after talking on the phone for about 4, 5 months, we decided to, get
Wow.
together, and
Hmm.
relationship took off from there.
Wow.
Yeah. Months
That's
later, we
awesome.
were in China. We were in China together.
Wow. Well, there's hope after all.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yes.
awesome. Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time. Please come back anytime. Thank you for what you do and how
Thank
you
you.
do it and why you do it and the lives you're changing. Some of those people you've met them, some you've never met them, maybe they heard of you, but the
Hmm.
impact, it's pretty big. So thank you.
I appreciate that, and I will definitely. I have to say this. I want to thank you
Thank
for sharing the message with me, and this will forever go down in one of the podcast interviews that I will always, always cherish and remember,
you.
uh, because of the experience of what you shared for me. So I want you to know from the bottom of my heart, I really appreciate that. I really appreciate
Thank
you
you.
sharing. And it
Thank
touched
you.
me.
Thank you. I have that effect on people. I don't know how. Yeah, people say you ask good questions. I'm like, okay, thank you. But thank you so much. That means a lot. It does. And yeah, we'll talk about having you back so we can kind of break down leadership stuff because
Okay.
there's so much to unpack. I think we just got on the surface. We did dig deep a little bit, but there's more. I'm
Yes.
sensing there's way more, and we
It would be
need
my
your
pleasure.
leadership.
It would
Yeah,
be my pleasure.
yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Rodney.
Thank you, Bernadette.